I want to start something today completely different here. My wife always says I have to promote my book, which I don't, but this is a book that I wrote a couple years ago, Where the Heavens Kiss the Earth, Mystical Insights of Personal Growth. You can get it on Amazon. And what I'm going to do today is I want to give a introduction. This is a 7-part program that we set up really to maximize yourself, to really understand what it is about you that you can express, and how do you express it, and how do you get the right mindset to see the world properly. Because the reality is that, let's say he'll get me upset, and I react to that, and I have a knee-jerk response. So I'm not in charge of my life. Well, what are the mindsets the Torah tells us to see the world in a proper way that will allow me to fulfill myself, to act meaningful? So a number of years ago, I broke this into 7 different processes. And I want to give an overview of the next 7 weeks of this process. This is called an introduction to the 7 mindsets. Okay, and I got most of the theoretical and Torah concepts are found in the book. So if you want to get it, please get it. If you do read it and you like it, give a review, because I'm going to start to try to get some of these teachings out. But I just felt very important to, the politics is very negative. So I from leaving that for a few weeks here, to talk about how to live a fulfilled life. What are the 7 mindsets? How do I go and see the world in a way that is going to allow me to express my inner self? Again, this is not the 7 mitzvot. This is my own understanding of the mindsets, that if we take the Torah mindsets and we apply it into our lives, we will live a fulfilled life. Okay? So we're going to start with number 1 today. The first important mindset to live a fulfilling, meaningful life. What is number 1? What do you start with? I mean, it's a big question. How am I going to start to live a meaningful life? What's the number 1? What's the starting point? I hope you're on the edge of your seat. And the truth is, it is such a oldie but a goodie. Okay? This question, everyone has asked themselves at some point in their lives. Everybody. And the question is very simple. What the heck am I doing here? Why are we here? Why are we in this life? That's a pretty important question. And the craziest part about the question is, although everyone has asked this question as an adolescent probably, at a certain point, you just kind of forget about it and you go forward. And you don't even think about it. Now, this is the existential question. Philosophers have asked this question for thousands of years, and unfortunately, they really don't have any good answers. They really don't. Probably the best one is Aristotle, which he explains essentially that the function of a oak tree is to become a tree. So the function of a person is his purpose to become the greatest person he could be. According to Aristotle, what is that? A philosopher. So you ask the philosopher, the purpose of the philosopher. Okay. It's not, there's some truth to what he's saying, but the philosopher, I think there's better things to be. So what is the purpose of why we're here? What is it? Why are we living our lives? And I start with this because if we don't have this, we don't have the right backdrop to think about anything. So let's go through this question. Why am I here? Now, I'm going to give you first, in one line, what the sages tell us. But it's not going to make any sense. So don't take it literally. Scratch the surface to understand. The sages say that the purpose of life is to get the maximum ultimate pleasure. What? That makes no sense. What does that mean? I mean, was it advocacy, being an advocate for hedonism? God forbid. What does that mean? What do the sages mean that the purpose in life is to get the ultimate and maximum pleasure? So the question is, what is pleasure? Okay, what's pleasure? I like hamburgers. Yep. Okay. Like steak. Okay. Like ice cream. Okay. So the purpose to eat ice cream? Is that the purpose in life? So first, we understand like this. We got to understand what it means, pleasure, and why this is so important, how to get the pleasure. Okay? What does pleasure mean? It does not mean a limited physical pleasure. Although physical pleasure is not bad, there's a place for it as a stepping stone in life. So there are permissible pleasures and forbidden pleasures. And we understand that. If you look at somebody who spends his life chasing after forbidden pleasures, he will be a miserable person. And a person who spends his life chasing after meaningless pleasures will also be a miserable person. So let's understand what pleasures mean here. Now, there's two kinds of pleasures in the world. One is called a physical pleasure, and one is called a spiritual pleasure. Now, what's the difference? Well, let's understand. A physical pleasure, they all work on the same principle, all of them. You have a lacking, you need to have it filled. Once it's filled, you don't want it anymore. So what do? You wait for have the lacking again, and then you fill it. And then you're the lacking, you fill it, lacking, fill it. That's the whole process there, right there. So, for example, if you come to my restaurant and I say, okay, you ordered a steak and you love steak and you ate the whole steak, it was delicious, fantastic, amazing. And then at the end, I say, okay, you know what? You're a great guy. And as a reward, I'm going to give you another whole steak. But the catch is you got to eat it right now. You're full, your stomach is popping. You just ate a giant, I don't know what size steak, a half a cow. So you don't want that pleasure anymore because the physical pleasures are all limited to time and space. Okay? And therefore they are limited. Now let's take an example of a spiritual type pleasure. What about love? So what do you say? Can you say, you know, I love you enough? No. There is no limit because it's not bound by a physical limit. So love, for example, which is already getting out of a coarse material experience, can now be an endless experience. I can love someone more and more and more. And not only that, it's incomparable, the physical to the spiritual pleasure. So if I have a guy who's having trouble with his son, he's driving him crazy. I say, Mr. Jones, you know, your son's driving you crazy, and I know you love hamburgers. I'm going to give you a life supply of hamburgers and rice-a-roni, the San Francisco treat, a life supply for your son, Billy. Now, who's going to agree to that? Nobody, because you can't compare them. One is a spiritual pleasure. It's not bound by time and space. And one's a limited pleasure. You ate the hamburger, it's over. It's a low-level pleasure. So you want to move up on the chain of getting what's a higher pleasure. So a physical pleasure, that's one. And if you do a permissible physical pleasure in the right balance, it's a good thing. We do not believe that a person is supposed to be an ascetic. But a person needs to understand the balance, because if he gets a forbidden pleasure, oh, that's gonna be bad. That's just gonna damage the person. If the person is focused on the low-level pleasures, they become a low-level person. I think I told you the story one time. I was once teaching in Hebrew University, and I wanted to show the people how the connection between the physical and the spiritual pleasures. So what happened was I passed out raisins. And I had everyone close their eyes, and I had to make a blessing. Because the sages tell us when you make a blessing on food, your pleasure is more because you're prepared for the experience. It's a more meaningful experience. So I had everyone close their eyes, make this blessing on the raisin, put it, I said, chew it slowly. And they did. And the next day I saw one of the students, he said, Rabbi, you changed my life. I said, really? That's so nice. How's that? He says, now I love to eat. I eat all day and all. I think you missed the point. The point was to get stuck on that. The point was to tune in and to connect your eating to a higher level. So I can get pleasure in my eating, but you know what? I get a lot more pleasure from something that's more spiritual, like love, or I'm doing something meaningful. And the truth is, the highest pleasure, which we can't really even imagine, I can't even describe it because we don't have words for it, is being able to experience the divine. That really is the highest pleasure. And I'll show it to you, because every single person, most people have had a moment where they felt somehow connected to something greater. You know, if they were under a starry sky or beautiful music, for a minute, you felt like connected with more than just your little world. That's tasting, an experience of tasting what is beyond, what's not limited. And that is a certain aspect of having a connection to whatever degree you slide to experiencing the infinite, experiencing God. When that experience is going to be the fullest dimension, that's a tremendous joy. That's going to be potentially in this life and after this life. Okay? So when we say it's getting pleasure, I don't mean the purpose in life is to get low pleasure. It's to get the highest level pleasure, which is going to be to connect to the infinite. Now, let me explain how this works, because this gets quite amazing. I got a question for you. And you all could have asked me this question, but I'm sort of talking a lot today, so not I didn't let you ask me this. I'm sure you're all thinking it. But what I said really doesn't make much sense. If the purpose in life that God created us to give us the ultimate maximum pleasure, then why is the world so difficult? Why is there so much suffering? How many people come out with pleasure in this world? 1 in a million? I saw you have some. And we have it better than other generations in terms of these things. But, a lot of challenges in life, So if God is going to create us to give us pleasure, then would you create a world that would look like this? You probably would create a world that would be different. I always say it's like, the Baskin Robbins has 31 wonderful flavors. But God can give you 1 trillion. If I was imagining it, I would say if I wanted to give people pleasure, when they would be born, they would have the taste of vanilla ice cream on their mouths 24/7. Then when they turn 2, they get chocolate. 3, strawberry. You hit 40, you get Rocky Road 24/7. You're tasting the chocolatey flavor of the marshmallows. But that's not the way God made the world. Well, why not? So you have to understand what is true pleasure and how to get it. What is true pleasure? Now, Steve, I'll use it as an example here. If I said to Stephen, I said, listen, Stephen, how would you like $10 billion? The world is now, with the inflation, your billions are worth millions now, so who knows? We'll give you $10 billion. Would you be happy?
Absolutely, 100%.
Absolutely, you'd be thrilled, unbelievable.
Yeah.
So now what happens is we make a big party. We give $10 billion to Stephen, and everyone loves him. Stephen's everyone's best friend. They have Stephen dolls. They have Stephen videos. They have Stephen statues. Everyone loves Stephen. You get a lot of friends when you get wealthy, right? That's the way it works.
Yeah. I don't know.
So
I've never been.
now all of a sudden they want to make a giant celebration to honor you. That you are now the greatest guy in the world. They make a giant hall, and they bring thousands of people in, and they announce, ladies and gentlemen, yours and my favorite in the world, the greatest, the most amazing, Steven. The crowd roars. And you go up to the stage to get your award for being the greatest guy in the world, and you feel really good. But then at that moment that you're about to get the award, I walk in, the guy gave you this money, and I wave, hey, remember me? Now, what happens to that feeling of, wow, I feel really great? Blows up. Because you know that you didn't do anything to create this. You like having the money, but you didn't make it. It's not yours. And every single human being in their core is built in a way that they want to earn it themselves. And that's the deeper reason why God put us into this difficult world. He could have created the world easy and perfect already in this connection. But then what am I doing? I'm nothing. I'm a robot. So what did God do? Your soul before you were created was getting this tremendous pleasure. And God put you into this world. And now all of a sudden you got forces pulling you left and right. And you have to choose between good and evil, lies and truth. And when you choose good, you actually earn that connection. I want you to understand this very deeply. It's not simply you earn the connection in the sense you're a good boy, here's a gift. Yeah, you get the world to come. That's why simpletons think about this. It's much deeper. Let me explain this. It's very, very deep and very important. If you take a guy who doesn't know good wine, give him bad wine. He tastes bad wine. I don't like wine. He has to develop his taste for it. Then when you give him the good wine, he appreciates it because he's developed a taste for it. He's learned what good wine is. When you listen to this very deep idea, everybody. When you spend your life acting righteously and choosing how to live a meaningful and righteous life, it's not that you get reward to experience God. You are now building the taste buds, the connectors to actually experience goodness. That's the ability to experience godliness. And you built it because you chose it. How can a person who, I once told you this, it's one of the scariest things, one of the worst sufferings in the afterlife. It's a certain type. I don't want to get into the particulars of what it's called right now, but a person who spends their whole life, the example I always gave you was he always eats hamburgers. He loves hamburgers. When he dies, he takes that consciousness with him, and he's now in a spiritual world looking for a hamburger. And he knows he can't, he knows it's not there. And he knows there's no pleasure, but he's built that consciousness. So what you're doing in this life now, God says, I can create the world. I want to give you good. I love every creation. I love I want to give them all good. But the ultimate good is not to give it all to you, because then you're nothing. You're like an angel, which is very good, but you didn't have free will to earn this. So I have to put you into a world where there's good and evil. And as you choose, you earn, you become a wonderful person, and you're able to experience more godliness of a meaningful life in this life and certainly afterwards. And that's why in Jewish law, the highest level of charity is not giving someone money. Because what that does is, well, you embarrass him. First he took it, and you feel great about yourself. You gave it to them. So a higher level is to give an anonymous gift so the person's not embarrassed and you don't know who you gave it to. That's a very high level. There's an even higher level to give someone a loan or a job. Because what happens is now, if I give someone a loan, they say, thanks for the money. I built this. I feel I did something and I'm giving you back what you gave me. That's the higher level. To give the person themselves their what's called their source of them, their humanity, which is the ability to build yourself. I said I wasn't going to get into politics today because we were going to try to build ourselves, but that's part of the problem in the system right now. They took that out of the system. The godly part about living a life. And this is one of the mistakes in the Constitution, where it says that the pursuit of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, it should have said life, liberty, and the pursuit of meaning. That would have been a better way to say it, because people think, oh, I'm happy, like just sitting there doing nothing. Well, maybe you are, but you're not, because a human being will not be happy with that. So a person takes what they're about and they just focus on very low-level things. They're not really attaining happiness. Happiness is a byproduct of living a meaningful life. When I do things that are right and I feel they are right and they are good, a feeling of happiness comes over me because I feel I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And that's why it's a complete mistake. If the pursuit of happiness means 3 cars, 4 cars, 12 houses, how come all these people are miserable? How come every one of these stars is divorced? I once thought about it. It's like the craziest thing. Some of the greatest love songs like ever written, like really classic love songs. And you listen to them and you realize that almost every one of those songs that were written for someone, they're divorced right now. It's kind of depressing. It's kind of depressing. But really, that's the truth. It means that, okay, so you had everything, but you didn't know how to actually maximize what you had. Now, how do you go and live a meaningful life? Let's go. I'll tell you 2 things here, 2 important things here. The 7 mitzvot, or for Jews, it's 13 mitzvot. The word mitzvah is translated as commandment. And that is true. That's one level. It is 7 commandments. 13 commandments, a mitzvah. But there's another word for mitzvah, and the word mitzvah is from the word savta, which means connection. And what the mitzvah does is, it's a physical act in this world that connects you to a higher dimension. So there's 2 ways that you live a meaningful life. They're both the same. One is the general and one is the specific individual. The general one is somebody who lives their lives doing the mitzvot, the connections, the commandments, the connections that God gave them on how to live a meaningful life. The 7 Noahide laws to be righteous. The 13 commandments for the Jews to be holy. A person who lives their lives under those parameters, with those qualities, starts to sense, I am living a purposeful life. What's your purpose? What's your purpose in life? You know what your purpose is? Your purpose is to be able to make the world a better place through your actions, and thereby make yourself greater, and thereby fix the world yourself, and to be able to connect with the infinite. That's the pleasure I told you in the beginning. The purpose is pleasure, but how do you get to that pleasure? You get to that pleasure through earning it by choosing correctly, doing the mitzvot that are appropriate to you to do the righteous way to act and live your life, which will now say, my life is meaningful. I am doing things to make the world better because God put me in this world to improve the world. Now, not everyone's got to have these giant, pictures of I'm going to be the CEO of this, that, and say this and say that. Not everyone is going to have that. Those who saw RFK speaking yesterday, it was very nice. He said, listen, he felt that he had said to God he wants to go and help people to get out of this toxic world that the corporations are shoving at people's throats without them realizing it. Those who saw his speech. So the person is saying, I have a noble pursuit to do kindness to make the world a better place. That is one of the, even though it's not one of the 7 Noahide commandments, it is the central, the positive command, which is charity and all things of that nature. And that is part of the Noahide laws. So there's 2 ways that we start to go and to live a purposeful life. One is in the general sense. If I do the mitzvot correctly, with all of their contexts, I'm a person who's very careful not to steal. I'm a person who respects other people's space, their needs, their qualities. Don't give them bad nicknames. I respect them and not to encroach upon their territory in any way, shape, or form. That's the person who's living his life righteously. He's doing the mitzvah of not stealing, of understanding the boundaries God put in this world. Okay? So when a person is starting to do those things, they're actually now saying, I have a purpose in life. My purpose is to live righteous. Now, if I'm not going to change on a giant scale, but I'm going to change the world in my local scale. Like the famous rabbi who said, when he was young, he said, I'll change the whole world. And then he got older, he says, you know what? I'm going to change my country. And then he got older and he said, I'll change my city. He said, you know what? At least I'll change my town. And then his old man said, I'll change myself. Okay? You start changing yourself, it has an effect. You're acting like a kind person. I would encourage everyone on an amazing thing to do tomorrow. So Victor Miller says this is one of his important lessons in life on how to develop yourself. Tomorrow, I challenge everyone to go do one act of kindness that you think, I want to do an act of kindness to make the world a better place, to live a meaningful life as God commands me, as is what I'm supposed to be doing in this world, and I want no one to know about it. And it could be a tiny thing. It could be a tiny thing. You just do one small thing, but you're doing it consciously. It's a new way to understand. We're not flopping through life like, well, what are we doing here? We'll put another TV station on. No, what we're doing is we're building ourselves and building the world. And everyone has a mission. 7 Noahide laws mostly are in the not to do, to keep the parameters of reality in the righteous world. The Jewish people have the 613 commandments, which is the fuel, the inner fuel. That's why it has to be a 24/7 operation. But everyone has their mission to choose correctly, help perfect themselves, and as much as their environment will allow, and thereby they are doing their purpose in the world. And they're starting the process of experiencing the infinite, because they are becoming God-like. Just like God is compassionate, you be compassionate. You're starting to connect. Now, the second part of how to do this, the how-to of living a purposeful life, is the first one was the general, the commandments. Then there's a second part that's a little bit more difficult because it's individual. What qualities do I have that God gave me that I can do? So, I want to give a shout out to Dan and to Rod. So Dan and Rod and all of you here, said, listen, we think that letting people know about the Torah and God's will for all of humanity is an important thing, and dedicating our time to do it. I was inspired to start this series. I saw Rod had done a beautiful thing. He cut up some of the talks that we gave, which are very long. We go for a long time, not people's attention span is less than a minute and a half now. And Rod cut some of the things up for people. So a person sees a blast of an idea that can change their lives. That got me excited. I said, yeah. It's fantastic. So there people are thinking about what qualities did God give me? And he gave every single person unique qualities that they could do something special. It doesn't have to be on the level of, creating this giant charity corporation. It can be very, very local. It's because it starts with whatever it is that are the qualities that you have in life. So a person now has to ask themselves and say, if God put me into this world, because he didn't make the world perfect. He could have, but he chose not to. He chose to leave the mission for mankind. So now what am I going to do to do my purpose in this process? And when you do that, you start to live a purposeful life. That is the tremendous, tremendous understanding. And that's what the sages say. The purpose of life, God wanted to give you the maximum ultimate pleasure. He didn't want to hurt you, God forbid. He wanted to do that. But what's the maximum pleasure? It's to earn the connection to the infinite by making yourself godlike, by making yourself wonderful, by making yourself kind, by living in a world where they're pulling you in different directions. And that is happening so difficult, so harshly in the world right now. But when a person chooses that, they become that much greater. The person sees through lies and says, I don't want this. I want to be on the side of right. I want to do what's good. Then what they're doing is they're building themselves, and they're corroborating peace in the world. Their corresponding place in the world, they're building that too. And that means they're doing their function. They're leading a purposeful life. You live a purposeful life, you're happy. When you live a life that's not purposeful, you're not happy. It's very, very simple. Very, very simple. Every time you see a person and he's got all the pleasures, all the stuff, and he's miserable, that's why. Because it doesn't do anything. It's level one. It's like a stepping stone. Good. God gave you, allowed you certain pleasures. Yes, he gave that to you. So then you can grow up and move to a greater pleasure. Move from a hamburger to love. Move from love to a mission. Move to a purpose in life, to experiencing the divine. That's what it's about. So I think that this in my system here is the first thing to do. The first thing to do is to live a life where you say to yourself that the reason why I'm here is for a real purpose. It's not arbitrary. I really don't understand how people who believe the world is random, how they get up every morning. It's like terrible. It's like what? The world has no meaning? It's a cosmic accident? Yeah, well, that's why the people are so stupid. Because what they have to do is they have to just fill themselves up and just keep drinking beer and fill themselves up because it's meaningless. That's terrible. That's a really harsh, false reality. Life is very, very meaningful. It's very, very meaningful. And the meaning of life is God created an incredible world, a beautiful world with its challenges, and put a human being in the middle and said, now you choose. And when you choose properly, you build yourself, you build the world, and you connect back to your source. And that is your ultimate pleasure. Okay, I'm going to open up for questions, comments, and ideas.